Okay, cool. Well, let's down to the brass tacks. Time to mix. Time to mix.
You got to tell me what that means.
Okay, so we talked about gain structure earlier. How critical is gain structure?
Gain structure is pretty much everything. I can really dive into the weeds on how I set gain structure and then how I bust things to actually control gain structure. Because if I take a lav mic or a head mic and I gain that up to, well, in your console, I would say minus 18, but you guys use the Nordic, so at 0, like he said. And then you ran that at full volume through the house, it would be instant feedback. So there are ways to create that later. But like they said, gain is everything. Gain is the initial level that everything past the console is fed from. So you have to start everything, and having everything at that baseline means as you build your mix, you've got a relative level that everything sits at. Now, you're not going to need all of those things at that level, but it's still a relative place. Step from there, you really just kind of work your way down this channel strip. I mean, it's logical. They build the channel strips kind of that way on purpose. But you start with gain, you set it, and high pass. So there's polarity, phantom power, all that. I'm just going to leave that stuff alone. I'm going to act like that's already all set up. But high pass is kind of the first, or low pass is the first place you're kind of going to start. Knowing the instrument and knowing what its frequency range is kind of the first thing you kind of have to think about. So if we're starting with a kick drum, personally, I don't use a high pass. There are a lot of people that use a high pass to clean it up a little bit. Depending on the acoustics of your space or what's going on, you may not want some of the super sub low energy, so you can high pass it a little bit and clean it up. I don't usually do that, but if we jump up to, let's say, a hi-hat, we definitely don't need all of that low frequency, so we can clean up some of that. So I think about it, and you can see that, right, when I do that? So I would think about it from that perspective. I would grab that high pass, and I'm going to bring it up to somewhere in the 250 range, because it does have some low frequency content. I don't need all of it, so I'm going to start somewhere in there. But that's also a feel thing. I know that because I've done it. I've done it a long time. I would challenge you guys to, I don't know how much time you guys have when you're setting up on a Sunday morning, but do they do virtual sound check either?
No,
sorry, I'm asking some questions that I don't know. I apologize.
It's okay.
But being able to listen and hear that difference is critical, because I know that after doing thousands of shows, but I also know it depends. It depends on the player. It depends on who's hitting that.
Right.
Hitting that instrument.
How hard they're playing. Are they a soft player or a hard player? You probably, if you haven't mixed a lot, you see a drummer go, yeah, it's drums. Like, there are vast differences between two drummers and how much they control themselves, how hard they actually hit, and how that translates through 11 microphones.
Massively.
Massive differences.
I mean, I don't complain at all where I mix now. I mix some of the, I feel like I paid my dues, honestly, in my past, but I get to mix some of the greatest musicians ever now. And even in that scenario, there is one drummer that is absolutely hands and feet above everybody else. The same drum set, but it's the way he plays, it's the way he hits the drums. All of my virtual sound check tracks that I keep just for myself, it's all with him playing the drums, because there is that big of a difference just in the way they play and the way they hit the drums. But you've also got to know that. You don't get the luxury of picking the drummer and having the same person, so you've got to understand what is correctable, what is not correctable, and that actually takes quite a bit of practice. The other thing I wanted to say, sorry, and I meant to say this earlier on the whole relationship thing, and it goes along with the quality of the drummer and the quality of the players, and it really focuses on the relationship. These people on stage, everybody thinks of them as some untouchable, some whatever. They have the exact same self-confidence problems that you might sitting behind a console. It's identical. But you won't know that until you have a relationship with them. But that's where some of those tensions can come, because when we have attitudes, we have issues with them. You're hitting on their self-conscious problem, they're hitting on your self-confidence problem, and it's just an explosion. Right. So knowing that we're all dealing with the same thing, I think, is critical to understand. I meant to say that earlier. Sorry.
Yeah, and it may come out in different ways. They may be fine with talking. I don't like talking, but they may be fine getting out here and talking, but the way they strum the guitar, or in their songwriting, or the way they, whatever, if they have to say a prayer, they might clam up. It may present different ways, but just having that relationship with him, knowing that about each person, is going to build trust between you and them, and know that you have their back if they know that, and they know you have their back, so that when you do have to have those conversations, or when things go awry in a service, you're on the same team. You're going to figure it out together. We're going to make it through. People are going to hear about Jesus. Okay, so
Am I supposed to talk about mixing more?
that's the whole thing is all mixing.
Okay.